Hello Year 8, today I'm going to be talking to you about the carbon cycle. So your key processes that you're going to know about today are photosynthesis, respiration and combustion, and to be thinking on a deeper level, suggesting what the carbon cycle shows us. So these are your learning outcomes to be able to explain the links between photosynthesis, respiration and combustion in the carbon cycle, describe the events in the carbon cycle, and to give one reason why we need to recycle carbon. And your keywords are carbon cycle, respiration, photosynthesis and combustion, and you should know at least two of those for definite: respiration and photosynthesis. And we're going to be looking a little bit about combustion today, so the burning of something, and the carbon cycle, what we're learning about today. So let's just go over those keywords and those word equations. So we've got a photosynthesis to begin with, so that's all to do with plants, okay? It's a chemical process which uses light energy to form glucose, its food source. So it takes in carbon dioxide from the air around, plus water that's taken in from the roots, plus our light energy from the sun, and it produces our products, which are glucose, the energy, and oxygen that in turn we use. So we need plants to be able to survive. Respiration, so that is in plants and anything living, okay? So it's a chemical process that releases energy from glucose in our muscle cells. So you get your glucose from the food that you eat, okay, plus oxygen that you take in from the air, gives us water in the form of water vapour that we breathe out a bit, carbon dioxide that we breathe out as well, that in turn the plants take in. So that's how we need the plants, and the plants need us. So it's a mutual relationship there, and the energy that's given off. And lastly, combustion, the process of burning something. So you might have fuel, okay, plus oxygen. It's going to produce a reaction. You're going to be able to burn something, and you're going to produce carbon dioxide and water. So the carbon cycle, all to do with carbon, okay, from the periodic table, symbol C. So I'm going to show you a video first. I'd just like you to watch this, okay, and listen very carefully.
Carbon dioxide, or CO2, is the main greenhouse gas in climate change. So how does CO2 get into our atmosphere? Well, carbon is part of a cycle. It starts with the sun, which hits the Earth's surface with more energy in 1 hour than the whole world uses in a year. Plants, which are kind of like biological chefs, take that sunlight and then suck in some CO2 from the air, mix them together, and bam! They create a stored form of energy in the form of carbohydrates, such as glucose and sucrose. The process is called photosynthesis. When animals like us eat those plants, our stomachs convert that food back into energy for our own growth. Greenhouse gases are a byproduct of this process and are released through waste. If those plants die, they decompose, and tiny microorganisms break down those carbohydrates and again release greenhouse gases as a byproduct. As you see, energy originates from the sun and is then transferred as it moves through the food chain. But sometimes, carbon-based organisms, like plants or animals, get stuck in the earth. When this happens, they're compressed under tons of pressure and turned into carbon-based fossil fuels like oil, coal, or natural gas. Since the Industrial Revolution, humans have been pulling those fossil fuels out of the ground and burning them, activating the stored energy to make electricity and power engines. But the thing is, it also releases millions of years worth of stored CO2 back into the air. In addition, humans breathe in oxygen and breathe out CO2, but plants do the opposite. Trees suck up huge amounts of CO2, which balances the cycle. Thus, deforestation reduces the plants that store CO2. We're attacking the cycle from both sides. Think of it like a computer. A computer can operate a few programs at a time, right? Normally, when you've finished with the document, you save and you close it, so as not to overwork the computer. Then imagine you stopped closing your documents, so they were all open at once. Your computer wouldn't be able to process it all. It would start to slow down, and then to freeze, and eventually it would crash, which might be where our environment is heading if we keep overloading the carbon cycle. So, is there any way to rebalance the ecosystem? What about technology? Technology is defined as a technique to solve a problem. And so, sustainable technologies are those whose output is equal to their input. They do not create negative externalities, such as CO2, in the present or the future. They sort of cancel themselves out to solve the problem. To achieve this, we need to invent sustainable technologies. If we put all the ideas and technologies ever created into one circle, then invention is the pushing of the boundaries of that circle. And the area outside of the circle is infinite, meaning the potential for invention is limitless. Think about some of the incredible clean technologies we have today. All those ideas have one thing in common. They all came from people. People innovate. People create. It's the limitless potential of creative people to build unimagined technologies that is going to stop climate change and rebalance the ecosystem. And that is something to be hopeful about.
Okay, so let's have a little look at the carbon cycle in a bit more detail then. So, if carbon dioxide enters the atmosphere at the same rate it leaves, the concentration, so how much of it there is, does not change. So it's always balanced. The carbon cycle shows how carbon dioxide enters and leaves the atmosphere and how carbon and its compounds can leave its carbon store. A carbon store or a carbon sink is anything that gives out carbon into the atmosphere. Examples of these carbon stores, so the atmosphere itself, plants, animals, fossil fuels, okay, and soil. There are lots of different examples of carbon stores. So this is the carbon cycle. Let's look at it one bit at a time. So we start off with carbon compounds in fossil fuels. So you burn fossil fuels in a power station. This then releases carbon in the form of burning, which is also known as combustion. And this then releases carbon in the form of carbon dioxide into the air and dissolves in the water, particularly the oceans. You then, remove the carbon by photosynthesis, and that takes in the carbon dioxide from the environment into the plant or the tree. So removing that carbon from the atmosphere, you're creating organic compounds in green plants. Then you also get plants using respiration to then release that carbon dioxide back again. So they do both processes, plants. Photosynthesis, they take in the carbon dioxide from the air and they breathe it out as well. So there's a balance there. You also get the death of a plant, that releases carbon again. You also get feeding, animals feed on the plants like cows, and you get this respiration, this return of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere from the living animal as well. So they take it in from the plants, but they also give it out in the form of carbon dioxide. You get your release of carbon from the animal dying, and then you get your organic compounds in dead organisms. They decay, break down the soil, and you get that way. You get your release of carbon again. You also get your release of carbon by the decaying, like I just said, and the decomposition, the breakdown of those dead organisms to release carbon dioxide back, as microorganisms respire, so like bacteria respire. And that's the carbon cycle. So there's lots of different elements of it that you have to try and remember, as long as you know that there's a balance between it being removed and being released again, that carbon. So what I'd like you to have a go at doing is completing this task. So I've got it on the side there. I've given approximately 10 minutes to have a go at this. If you take a little bit longer, that's fine. If you are still struggling, you can listen back and have a look at the video again, or you can do your own research as well. So the questions are the following. A says, the process by which both living organisms and animals return carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. 1 mark, so simply what is the process that we've been talking about. Number 2, Describe how decomposers, so anything that breaks something down, are involved in returning carbon dioxide back to the atmosphere. So that's things like bacteria, microorganisms. That's 2 marks, so a little bit more detail there as it says describe. So just a bit more information needs to be given to get the 2 marks. Number 3, describe what happens during the formation of fossil fuels. So again, describing, this one's for 4 marks, so it's asking for a good few points here to describe what happens during the formation, the making of fossil fuels. Number 4, write the word equation for combustion. So I talked about this earlier, so that's just simply writing the word equation for 2 marks. And lastly, number 5, explain why some scientists think that the combustion of fossil fuels, so the burning of fossil fuels, has put the carbon cycle out of balance. So what's happened to the carbon cycle? There's more burning of fossil fuels. Why is there no longer a balance? Okay, so I'd like you to pause the video and have a go at those questions, please. These need to be sent to your science teacher as part of your exercise for today. Okay, I'd also like you to look at the diagram here. This is it enlarged from the sheet before, and just see if you can identify the gaps. So I've covered over with the boxes what would be there. If you just look back at the carbon cycle that I spoke about, could you fill in the gaps if you were asked to? So this is something that I'm going to go over in a minute, so you don't need to send this to your science teacher. I'd just like you to pause the video and have a little think and see if you could put in any information into those 4 boxes yourself. Okay, so let's go over the answers then. So the first one, carbon compounds in fossil fuels. So that would be your first empty box. And that would be burnt, so fossil fuels would be burnt during combustion, and then you would get carbon dioxide released into the air and dissolved into the oceans. The next box on the left, you would then get your organic compounds in green plants. They take it in through photosynthesis, that carbon, and also release it in respiration. And lastly, if you get the death of a cow, or if you get the death of a tree, for example, you would get those organic compounds in dead organisms. Okay. These, I would normally go over the answers, but obviously I want you to send these to your science teacher. Here they are once again, if you didn't quite have a go at all of them. The process by which both living plants and animals return carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Describe how decomposers are involved in returning carbon dioxide back to the atmosphere, and describe what happens during the formation of fossil fuels. So please do have a go at those and send your answers to your science teacher. Also, what is the word equation for combustion? And lastly, explain why some scientists think that the combustion of fossil fuels has put the carbon cycle out of balance. Okay, let's have a little go at this. So I'm going to give you just a short time. If you pause the video when I say so, and see if you can get the answers to these bullet points. So see if you can interpret the carbon cycle so far from what we've learnt. Name the 2 processes in the carbon cycle that release, so that give out carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Okay, to pause the video, have a little think, and then unpause when you've got an answer. So hopefully you said respiration and combustion. Name the place where carbon can be stored in the carbon cycle. Pause the video, have a think. Hopefully you thought animals, plants, oceans, fossil fuels or soil. You wouldn't need all of those, but at least a couple would be good. Name the process in the carbon cycle that removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Pause and have a think. Hopefully you thought photosynthesis and by dissolving in the oceans. Describe what the carbon cycle shows. So pause the video, have a think. It shows how carbon and carbon compounds move around the earth. Something along those lines would be perfect. On a deeper level of thinking, how can an increase in carbon in the atmosphere affect the earth? Pause the video and have a think. And I've put an increase in carbon in the atmosphere can increase the chances of global warming, and hopefully you know a little bit about that and what's going on at the moment. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you have a little bit more of an understanding of the carbon cycle. Any problems or any struggling of how to complete the exercise, just email your science teacher. This is the last lesson before the summer, so I hope you all have a really nice summer and hopefully see you in September in year 9. Take care.